by tribal law, you have to marry me now. You saw me like this. Amina had always been curious about the world beyond the city. She had grown up in a place where life was fast, crowded, and noisy. Cars honked endlessly, shops never closed, and people seemed always in a hurry. But deep inside, she felt something was missing. She wanted to experience life in its simplest form, to see how people lived when the world moved slower, when the air smelled of earth after rain, and when every face in the village knew every other face. Her parents had hesitated when she mentioned visiting her distant relatives in a remote village. "It's not like the city, Amina," her mother had warned. "Life there is very different. The customs, the rules, you need to be careful." But Amina's curiosity could not be contained. She imagined waking up to birds singing instead of car horns, walking on paths made of earth rather than concrete, and seeing a sky so wide that it made her feel small in a beautiful way. After a long journey of hours in a rattling bus, followed by a dusty ride on a narrow, winding path through hills and rivers, Amina finally arrived at the village. She was greeted warmly by her relatives, who were delighted to see a young, bright-eyed girl from the city. The house was small, made of clay and wood, with a courtyard in the center where children played and women were busy cooking over open fires. Everything was different, yet inviting. Amina's heart raced with excitement and a little nervousness. The village was preparing for an important celebration. She noticed everyone bustling about, decorating the central square with colorful cloths, fresh flowers, and small lanterns. The air was filled with laughter, chatter, and the scent of spices from cooking pots. It was the kind of energy she had never experienced in the city, and it fascinated her. She wandered through the streets, trying to absorb every little detail. The way children ran barefoot, the rhythmic sound of women singing while pounding grain, the elders sitting calmly under the shade of trees, sharing stories. Each moment felt like a page from a living storybook. As the day progressed, Amina's excitement grew. She had been told there would be a ceremonial event that evening, one of the most important in the village's calendar. She was eager to watch, unaware of how much her presence that day would change her life. Curious as ever, she decided to explore the areas behind the main gathering. She wandered into a quieter part of the village, where the houses were smaller and the shadows of the late afternoon were long. She was drawn by laughter and the faint sound of someone humming a tune she didn't recognize. That's when she saw him, Derek. He was standing near a small stream, his sleeves rolled up, hands busy fixing something she couldn't quite see. There was a quiet strength about him, a calmness that made the air around him feel different. Amina didn't mean to stare, but she found herself captivated. He looked up for a brief moment, and their eyes met. There was no smile, no word exchanged, only a flicker of recognition, a silent acknowledgement that they had seen each other. In that moment, Amina felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. She didn't know why, but she felt like she had stumbled into something important, something beyond her understanding. Suddenly a small child ran past her, causing her to step into a shadowed corner. Derek turned away, focusing again on his work. Amina, curious as ever, took a careful step closer, wanting to see what he was doing. She didn't notice the elders nearby, watching from a distance. In this village, every action was observed, every unexpected event noted. And what she had just done, entering a private space without permission, was not just unusual, it was significant. From across the courtyard, Amina could hear faint voices, soft murmurs that quickly grew louder. She couldn't understand the words at first, but the change in tone was unmistakable. People were concerned, discussing her presence in low, serious tones. One of the elders, an older woman with sharp eyes, walked toward her with a calm but firm step. She placed a gentle hand on Amina's shoulder, and the weight of the situation hit her all at once. Something about the way the woman looked at her told her that she had unknowingly crossed a line she didn't even know existed. "Come with me," the elder said softly. There was no anger in her voice, only a quiet insistence. Amina obeyed, her mind racing with questions. What had she done? Why was everyone suddenly staring at her? The elder led her to a shaded area near the main hall, away from the crowd. Here, Amina could finally take a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of fear and curiosity inside her. The elder spoke, her voice steady but serious. She explained the village's traditions, the importance of honor, and the responsibilities tied to certain actions. Amina listened carefully, trying to absorb every word. She realized that by merely seeing Derek in a private moment, one that was meant to remain unseen, she had unintentionally triggered a custom that bound people together in a way she had never imagined. The concept was foreign, almost unbelievable to her, but the earnestness in the elder's eyes left no room for doubt. This was real. Amina felt her heart pound. She had come to this village to experience life, to learn, to see how people lived, but she had never imagined that she would become a part of the village's living traditions so quickly. Fear, confusion, and an unexpected sense of responsibility swirled inside her. Derek, too, seemed unaware of the complexity of what had just happened. He continued his work, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding around them. Yet the villagers had already seen, judged, and whispered. The moment had changed everything. As evening approached, Amina's relatives gathered around her, offering gentle advice and warnings. "You must be careful," they said. "In this village, every action has meaning. What you saw, it is serious." She nodded, trying to appear calm, but inside her mind was spinning. She realized that this visit, meant to be a simple adventure into tradition, had become something far greater. She was no longer just a visitor. She had become part of the story, a story that had begun the moment her eyes met Derek's. Despite her fear, Amina also felt a strange spark of intrigue. Derek, who seemed so calm and confident, had unknowingly drawn her attention in a way she had never experienced before. She didn't understand it, but she felt a connection, a sense that their paths were now linked in a way she could not untangle. The village, with its rhythms, customs, and watchful eyes, was teaching her lessons she had never expected to learn. Night began to fall, and lanterns were lit, casting warm light over the courtyard. The celebration she had anticipated would soon begin, but her mind could not focus on music, dancing, or food. Instead, it was filled with the weight of what she had witnessed and the significance it held. Amina knew one thing clearly. Her life had changed forever, and the journey she had begun with curiosity and excitement had now entered a realm she could not have imagined. And as she stood there, quietly observing Derek from a distance, she felt a mixture of fear, respect, and a strange anticipation. Something had begun in that fleeting accidental encounter, something that neither of them could ignore. Amina realized that she had stepped into a world where tradition, law, and human connection intertwined in ways she would have to navigate carefully, and that the next step she took would define not only her visit, but perhaps her entire future. Amina could not sleep that night. The village, which had seemed so calm and welcoming during the day, now felt alive with whispers and unseen eyes. Every shadow outside her window, every faint sound of footsteps, made her heart race. She tried to think clearly, to remind herself that she had only been curious and had done nothing wrong intentionally. Yet, the words of the elder echoed in her mind. Seeing Derek in that private moment had consequences. She sat on the edge of the simple woven bed, her hands clasped tightly together, and thought about what she had learned. Tribal law, as explained by the elder, was not like the rules she knew in the city. Here, honor and respect were woven into every action, every glance, every gesture. What she had seen, she realized now, was more than an accident. It had triggered a tradition that could not be ignored. Amina remembered Derek's calm face, the way he had not seemed to notice her presence at all. In the city, she might have laughed off such a moment, assumed it would be forgotten, or explained herself easily, but here explanations did not erase the weight of what had occurred. The elders had made it clear. The moment she had seen him in a private space created a bond, a responsibility that could not be dismissed. She felt a mix of emotions. Fear was the strongest, fear of the unknown, fear of the expectations that now rested on her shoulders, but underneath it, a quiet curiosity lingered. Who was Derek really? Why did his presence make her feel a strange mixture of awe and nervousness? Even though the situation was serious, she could not deny that she was drawn to him. The next morning, the village was bustling with activity, just as it had been the day before. But for Amina, nothing seemed ordinary anymore. People greeted her politely, but she could sense the subtle glances, the whispered conversations as she walked by. It was as if everyone knew her secret, the incident that had changed the rhythm of her visit. She tried to avoid Derek, but it was impossible. The village was small, and the paths crossed constantly. When she finally saw him again, he was sitting by the stream where she had first noticed him. This time, he looked up immediately as she approached. There was a seriousness in his eyes, a quiet tension that made Amina realize that he understood the gravity of the situation, even if he said nothing. "Good morning," she said softly, unsure of what else to say. "Good morning," he replied, his voice calm, but his expression unreadable. There was a weight behind his words, as if he carried a responsibility he did not fully want, yet could not avoid. Amina felt the tension between them, the unspoken truth that had suddenly entered both their lives. Derek led her to a quiet area near the edge of the village and spoke carefully. "Amina, you need to understand. What happened yesterday is serious. Tribal law is not something we take lightly. It is about honor, respect, and responsibility. Seeing me like that, it creates a bond that our community cannot ignore. She had expected explanations, but hearing it from Derek himself made it real. She wanted to argue, to explain that it was an accident, that she had no intention of breaking any rules, but the sincerity in his voice stopped her. She realized that in this world, intentions were only part of the story. Actions, even accidental ones, could carry consequences that were larger than any one person. I didn't know, she whispered. I never meant to. Her voice trailed off. I know, Derek said gently. I understand that it was not intentional. But the law is not about blame. It is about what happens next. We have to face it, together. Amina felt a cold shiver run through her. Together? The word sounded both comforting and terrifying. She had come to the village to explore and learn, to experience something new. She had not expected to be drawn into a situation that might change her life forever. And yet, there was something in Derek's calm, steady presence that made her feel a strange sense of security. Over the next few days, the elders called meetings to discuss the situation. Amina watched as men and women, old and young, gathered to speak quietly among themselves. Derek remained respectful, listening carefully, but there was no hint of resentment in his behavior. He seemed to accept the reality of the moment, even if it was uncomfortable. Amina admired his poise, though she also felt nervousness deep inside. One afternoon, she sat with the elder woman who had first explained the law to her. The elder was kind, with a voice that carried authority without harshness. She explained more about the customs, the way the community viewed honor and responsibility. Amina, she said gently, in our village, every action affects more than just yourself. You saw something private, yes, but it is not just about what you saw. It is about respect, about trust, and about taking responsibility for the roles we play in each other's lives. Amina nodded slowly. She tried to understand fully, but it was difficult. In her world, such laws seemed strange, almost unbelievable. But here, they were very real, and she could see the seriousness in everyone's eyes. This was not a story or a game or a misunderstanding. This was real life, and she had become a part of it. As she learned more, Amina began to notice subtle details about Derek. The way he helped others quietly, without seeking attention. The way he moved with confidence, yet treated everyone with respect. The small acts of kindness that revealed his character. She realized that this bond, imposed by law, was also an opportunity to see a side of life she had never known. In the city, people were busy, focused on themselves. Here, every action had meaning, and every gesture carried weight. But even as she began to understand, Amina struggled with her own feelings. She felt trapped by the law, by the customs, by the expectations of people she barely knew. And yet she could not deny a growing curiosity about Derek himself. She wondered what he thought of her, whether he resented her or whether he, too, felt the strange pull of connection that she could not explain. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the village, Amina found herself walking alone near the stream. Derek was there, as if waiting. He did not speak at first. They stood silently, listening to the sounds of the village settling into the night. The air was filled with crickets, soft wind, and the distant laughter of children. Finally, Derek spoke. Amina, I want you to know you do not have to fear me. I will not force you. But you must understand the seriousness of the situation. Our laws, our traditions, they are not meant to harm. They are meant to guide us, to keep respect and trust alive in our community. Amina looked into his eyes and saw honesty, patience, and something else she could not name. It made her heart ache in a strange way. She realized that the bond she had accidentally created was not just about law, but about people, feelings, and understanding. For the first time, she felt that perhaps this experience, terrifying as it was, could also teach her something valuable. Amina observed the village's rituals, helping where she could, learning about customs she had never imagined. Derek was always nearby, sometimes guiding her, sometimes allowing her to learn on her own. She began to see the delicate balance between personal freedom and community responsibility, and she began to understand that life here was not just rules, but a living, breathing system of trust, care, and mutual respect. Slowly, fear turned into understanding. Nervousness became cautious curiosity, and in the quiet moments when she and Derek were alone, a sense of connection began to grow. It was subtle at first, a shared glance, a gentle smile, the comfort of knowing that someone understood her. Amina could not predict where this would lead, but for the first time since arriving, she felt that perhaps she could face the challenges ahead. By the end of the week, Amina realized one thing clearly. Tribal law was not simply about punishment or obligation. It was about guidance, about ensuring that every action, every choice was made with respect for others. And in seeing Derek, and in being seen by him, she had stepped into a world she had never known. A world that was strict, yes, but also full of wisdom, kindness, and unexpected opportunities for growth. Amina felt a quiet determination. She would face whatever came next, not with fear, but with understanding. She would honor the customs of this village, learn its lessons, and perhaps discover something about herself in the process. The journey was just beginning, and though the path was uncertain, she felt ready to walk it, step by careful step, guided by respect, curiosity, and a slowly growing trust in Derek and the village around her. Amina had begun to understand the seriousness of her situation, but understanding did not make it any easier. Each day felt like a delicate balancing act between respecting the village's customs and maintaining her own sense of independence. The villagers were kind, but their eyes always seemed to measure her actions, as if she were constantly being tested. Even small gestures, like the way she carried water from the well or helped in the kitchen, were observed carefully. She could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her, making her heart race with anxiety. Derek, on the other hand, seemed calm. He moved through the village with confidence, greeting everyone respectfully, yet never allowing the attention of others to distract him from his responsibilities. Amina could see why the villagers trusted him so deeply. There was a quiet authority in the way he carried himself, a sense of honor and duty that was evident in every action. And yet, whenever their eyes met, she could sense a complexity in him that went beyond duty, something unspoken, a hint of personal struggle hidden beneath his calm exterior. One afternoon, as the sun beat down on the clay rooftops, Amina found herself near the central courtyard, watching the preparations for another village ritual. Her heart sank a little as she realized that these ceremonies would require her active participation, and she feared she might make a mistake or unintentionally break another rule. Derek appeared beside her, carrying a small basket of fruit. "You seem tense," he said gently, handing her the basket. Amina took it, trying to smile. "I am. Everything feels so complicated here. I just want to do the right thing, but I don't know what that is anymore." Derek nodded, understanding. "I know it feels that way. At first it always does. But the villagers are not trying to punish you. They want to guide you to help you understand. And you have to guide yourself as well. Learn, observe, and take your time. Don't let fear control your actions." She nodded, appreciating his words, though the nervousness did not entirely leave her. As the day continued, Amina moved carefully through her tasks, mindful of every gesture and every word. She helped in the kitchen, carried water, and observed the children playing in the courtyard. The villagers watched silently, occasionally nodding at her when she did something correctly. It was exhausting to feel constantly evaluated, yet she also began to sense a rhythm in their expectations, a structure that, while strict, was predictable in its own way. However, not all moments were calm. Amina could feel the tension building whenever she saw Derek. She wanted to speak to him, to ask questions and share her fears, but each time she approached, the presence of other villagers made it impossible. Whispers followed her wherever she went, reminding her constantly that her every move mattered. She began to realize that the situation was not just about law or about witnessing a private moment. It was about perception, reputation, and the delicate balance of honor in a close-knit community. One evening, as the sun began to set behind the hills, casting a golden glow over the village, Amina found herself alone near the stream again. Derek was there, seated on a smooth rock, staring thoughtfully at the water. The quiet presence of the stream, the rustling of leaves, and the gentle hum of insects created a peaceful atmosphere. But Amina felt a storm brewing inside her. "I don't know if I can do this," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I understand the law, I understand the tradition, but I feel trapped. It's not just the law. I feel like my choices don't matter anymore. Everything is decided for me, and I don't know how to be myself." "Amina, I understand. I feel the same way, in a different way. I have responsibilities I cannot ignore. The elders, the customs, they guide my every action. But that does not mean we are powerless. There is room within these rules to find understanding, to make choices that honor both the law and ourselves. You just need to find your place in it." She had come to this village seeking adventure and learning, but what she had found was a complex web of duty, honor, and expectation. And yet, in Derek's words, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe it was possible to respect tradition while also keeping a part of herself intact. Over the next few days, Amina tried to assert herself more. She asked questions, tried to participate actively in rituals, and even offered suggestions for helping the villagers with daily tasks. Some villagers responded warmly, appreciating her curiosity and willingness to learn. Others, however, were less receptive, their gazes critical, their words cautious. It was exhausting to navigate this delicate social landscape, but Amina felt a sense of purpose in her efforts. Derek remained a steady presence throughout. He guided her gently, never criticizing, but always ensuring she understood the importance of her actions. Amina began to notice small things about him that fascinated her. The way he listened carefully to elders, the way he quietly helped children with their chores, the subtle humor in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Despite the pressure of tradition, he carried himself with kindness and dignity, and Amina found herself increasingly drawn to his character. Yet, the tension between them was undeniable. Every time they were alone, there was a mix of unspoken words, curiosity, and cautious respect. Amina felt the pull of connection, but also the weight of expectation. She could not ignore that their interactions were being watched, that every glance could be interpreted in ways she did not intend. The sense of being observed made her cautious, careful, and at times frustrated. One afternoon, as they walked together through a narrow path lined with flowering shrubs, Amina stopped abruptly. "Derek, I don't know if I can keep doing this," she admitted. "Every day feels like walking on a tightrope. I want to learn, I want to understand, but I feel like I'm losing myself in the process." Derek paused, looking at her with steady eyes. "Amina, you will not lose yourself. You are learning, yes, but learning does not mean surrendering who you are. It means finding your strength within a different system. I understand your fear, and I respect it, but you are stronger than you know. And this challenge, it is not meant to destroy you, but to help you grow." His words comforted her, but they also made her reflect. Was this growth something she truly wanted? Could she embrace a life shaped by rules so different from her own? Amina did not have an answer yet. She only knew that the days were growing heavier, that the whispers of villagers and the unspoken rules of tradition pressed on her constantly, and that her feelings for Derek were becoming harder to ignore. The tension in the village grew as well. Elders continued to watch closely, discussing the situation in hushed voices. Amina could sense that decisions were being made, judgments forming, and expectations solidifying. She realized that the next steps would be critical, not just for her, but for Derek and the entire community. Their connection, accidental though it had been, was under scrutiny. Every interaction carried weight, and the future depended on navigating it carefully. One night, unable to sleep again, Amina walked to the edge of the village where the hills met the sky. The stars stretched endlessly above her, and the quiet of the night offered a rare moment of peace. She thought about her life in the city, her dreams, her family, and the path that had brought her here. And she thought about Derek, about the responsibility she had accidentally triggered, and about the lessons she was learning. She realized that resistance, while natural, was not enough. She could not simply reject the customs or ignore the expectations. She would need to understand them, to respect them, and to find a way to navigate the challenges ahead. But she also knew she had to maintain her voice, her thoughts, and her sense of self. It would not be easy, but it was necessary. As dawn approached, Amina felt a renewed determination. The journey was far from over, but she was learning, growing, and beginning to see that the tension, fear, and resistance she felt were part of a larger story, a story about honor, respect, and human connection. She could not control the past, but she could shape how she moved forward step by careful step, with courage, understanding, and awareness. And so, as the first light of morning painted the village in golden hues, Amina prepared herself for the challenges ahead. The days would not be simple, the expectations would not lessen, and the whispers would continue. But she was learning to face them, to find balance between tradition and her own voice, and to navigate the complex web of responsibility, respect, and growing emotions that connected her to Derek and the village in ways she was only beginning to understand. The days following the tension and uncertainty slowly began to change for Amina. She found herself noticing small details about the village she had not paid attention to before. The way the sun lit up the hills in the early morning, the rhythmic sound of water flowing through the stream near the edge of the village, and the laughter of children echoing across the open courtyards. These simple moments, once overlooked, now carried a beauty that she felt deep in her heart. Life here was different, yes, but it was also alive in ways she had never experienced in the city. Derek became an unexpected guide to this new world. At first, Amina had been wary of him, unsure whether to trust someone so deeply entwined with the village's customs. But over time she began to see beyond his role as a keeper of tradition. He had a quiet kindness, a patience that seemed endless, and a sense of humor that appeared in fleeting glances or small smiles when he thought no one was watching. Slowly, the fear that had gripped her began to ease, replaced by curiosity and, more subtly, admiration. One afternoon, Amina was helping gather herbs near the hills when she stumbled on a patch of wildflowers. She bent down to examine them, feeling the delicate petals brush against her fingers. Derek approached quietly, carrying a basket of fruits for the villagers. "Those are beautiful," he said softly, kneeling beside her to look more closely. Amina smiled, a little embarrassed. "They are. I've never seen flowers like this before. Everything here seems alive, in a way the city never is." Derek nodded, his eyes scanning the hills beyond them. "The land here has its own rhythm. You only notice it when you slow down enough to listen." She glanced at him, realizing that his words carried more than just observation. They were an invitation to trust, to slow down, and to open herself to the world around her. For the first time, she felt she could share her thoughts without fear of judgment. Over the following days, Amina and Derek found small ways to spend time together, often under the pretense of village chores. Sometimes it was helping the elders with gathering food, sometimes it was walking along the stream to fetch water, and sometimes it was assisting in preparations for ceremonies. With each shared task, a quiet understanding grew between them. Amina began to see that Derek was not only bound by tradition, but also guided by a personal sense of honor and care. He treated others with respect and gentleness, but he also seemed to notice her, truly notice her, in ways that others did not. One evening, after the village had settled down and the air was cool and calm, Derek suggested they walk to the hills overlooking the village. Amina followed, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. As they reached the top, the entire village lay below them, bathed in the golden glow of sunset. The mountains in the distance seemed to stretch endlessly, and the quiet of the moment felt almost sacred. "This view," Amina whispered, unable to find the right words. "It's incredible." Derek smiled, his gaze shifting from the horizon to her face. "It's beautiful," he said softly, "but not as beautiful as this moment. Seeing it with someone who appreciates it makes all the difference." Amina felt her cheeks warm, realizing that the words were gentle, personal, and kind. There was no pressure, no expectation, only an invitation to share a quiet moment. For the first time since arriving in the village, she felt a sense of ease, a feeling that perhaps it was possible to navigate her situation without fear consuming her. In the days that followed, their connection deepened. Amina found herself looking forward to small interactions, a shared smile while carrying water, a quiet conversation while assisting the elders, or a moment of laughter over a playful misstep with the children. These moments, though simple, began to weave a bond between them, a bond built not on obligation or law, but on trust, mutual respect, and the beginnings of genuine understanding. Yet, even as connection grew, the weight of tradition remained. The villagers watched carefully, noting every interaction, every gesture. Amina sometimes felt self-conscious, aware that her growing friendship with Derek might be scrutinized and interpreted in ways she could not control. But Derek's steady presence reassured her. He never forced conversation or attention, yet he always guided her gently, helping her navigate the complexities of village life. One afternoon, while helping an elder woman grind grain, Amina accidentally spilled some of the flour. Embarrassed, she began to apologize, expecting a sharp reprimand. But Derek stepped beside her, quietly smiling. "It's all right," he said. "Mistakes happen. What matters is learning from them, not fearing them." Amina looked at him, feeling the warmth in her chest. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight she had not felt before. For the first time, she realized that connection could be comforting, that trust could be nurtured, even in the midst of challenge and expectation. As the days passed, the pair continued to share quiet moments. Derek taught her about the land, the plants, and the rhythms of village life. Amina began to see the wisdom in the customs she had initially found overwhelming. They were not merely rules. They were lessons in respect, patience, and observation. Through these lessons, she felt herself growing stronger, more confident, and more capable of handling the responsibilities that had been unexpectedly placed upon her. One evening, a sudden summer storm rolled across the hills. The wind howled and rain began to pour, soaking the fields and streets. Amina and Derek had been collecting firewood when the first drops fell. They ran for shelter under the branches of a large tree, laughing as they tried to keep from getting drenched. The storm raged around them, yet in that moment they were isolated from worry and expectation. "This is ridiculous!" Amina shouted over the rain, her laughter echoing. "We're completely soaked!" Derek laughed, his eyes sparkling. Sometimes the best moments happen when nothing goes as planned. Amina realized that this was true. In the midst of fear, expectation, and uncertainty, small moments of joy and connection could flourish. She began to understand that trust and companionship were not about grand gestures, but about presence, understanding, and shared experience. As the storm passed, they made their way back to the village, soaked but smiling. Amina felt a sense of gratitude she could not fully express. She had come to the village seeking adventure and knowledge, but she had found something unexpected: a friendship, a guide, and perhaps the beginnings of a deeper connection with someone who understood her in ways few others could. Even as the connection grew, challenges remained. Amina was still acutely aware of the eyes of the village, of the whispers that followed her steps, and of the unspoken rules she had yet to fully comprehend. But the presence of Derek, the quiet moments they shared, and the lessons she learned about respect and trust helped her face these challenges with courage and resilience. In quiet moments, Amina began to reflect on herself as well. She noticed her own growth, the patience she had learned, the careful attention to detail, the way she could now navigate complex social expectations without fear overwhelming her. She realized that while the village had imposed rules she had not chosen, the experience had also shaped her in positive ways, teaching her empathy, observation, and humility. Derek, too, showed growth in subtle ways. While always guided by tradition, she noticed that he listened differently, asked questions about her experiences in the city, and seemed genuinely curious about her perspective. These moments of openness strengthened their connection, allowing them to see each other as individuals rather than simply as participants in an obligation imposed by law. By the end of Part 4, Amina and Derek had built a foundation of trust, respect, and quiet companionship. While challenges remained, the tension that had marked the beginning of their interactions had begun to ease. They shared laughter, moments of reflection, and mutual guidance, creating a bond that was neither forced nor superficial. Amina felt a growing confidence in her ability to navigate the village, to honor its traditions, and to maintain her own voice. She had begun to understand that connection and trust were not about grand declarations or dramatic gestures. They were about presence, patience, and shared experience. And in these moments, as the sun set over the hills and the village settled into evening, Amina realized that something had shifted. What had begun as fear and uncertainty was now transforming into curiosity, respect, and a quiet sense of hope. The journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face what lay ahead, guided by the lessons she had learned, the bond she was building with Derek, and the understanding that even in a world defined by tradition, human connection could thrive. The days grew shorter, and the village began to prepare for another important ceremony. Amina could feel the anticipation in the air. The elders moved quietly among the villagers, discussing arrangements, checking decorations, and reminding families of their duties. Every action carried weight, and Amina understood that this ceremony would be more than just celebration. It would be a moment of decision, of acknowledgement, of understanding for her and Derek. Amina woke early that morning, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had spent weeks learning, observing, and understanding the customs of the village. She had faced challenges, moments of fear, and a whirlwind of emotions, but she had also discovered a sense of strength she had never known she possessed. The lessons of patience, respect, and understanding had begun to settle in her heart. Derek appeared as usual, quiet, calm, and composed. He offered her a small smile, and for a brief moment, the weight of expectation seemed lighter. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Amina took a deep breath. "I think I am. I've learned a lot, more than I expected." He nodded, his eyes reflecting both relief and respect. "Then we will face this together." Together they walked toward the central courtyard, where villagers had gathered in anticipation. The decorations shimmered in the morning light, and the scent of fresh flowers and cooked food filled the air. Elders sat in places of honor, their eyes attentive, waiting for the moment to begin. Amina could feel the tension around her, the collective breath of the community as they prepared for what was to come. As they entered, whispers rippled through the crowd. Amina felt a moment of fear, remembering all that had led her here. The accidental encounter, the lessons, the challenges, and the growing connection with Derek. But she also felt a quiet confidence. She had faced her fears, learned the ways of the village, and found trust and understanding with Derek. She realized that this moment was not just about obligation. It was about choice, about respect, and about the bond that had grown naturally between them. The elder who had first explained the tribal law approached, her steps measured and calm. She looked at Amina with kind eyes. "Amina," she said softly, "you have come far in understanding our customs. You have observed, learned, and respected the ways of this village. Now, it is time to make a decision." Amina swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. She looked at Derek, who stood beside her with steady eyes, offering silent reassurance. Their connection, built over weeks of shared experience, gave her courage. She realized that the choice was not about defiance or submission. It was about honoring both herself and the community that had welcomed her. Amina began, her voice steady despite the nervousness in her chest, "I understand the responsibility that comes from what happened. I respect the customs, and I have learned much about your way of life. I choose to honor this bond, but I want it to be a union of respect, understanding, and mutual care." The elder nodded, a gentle smile crossing her face. "That is wise, Amina. True understanding comes when one respects tradition while keeping one's own voice. Derek, do you accept this?" Derek looked at her, a mix of relief and admiration in his eyes. "I do. I have learned from her courage, her curiosity, and her respect for our ways. This is not just about law. It is about partnership, understanding, and shared growth. I choose to honor this bond as well." A murmur of approval spread through the villagers. They had observed the growth, trust, and connection that had developed between the two. It was clear that their union would not be one of mere obligation, but of mutual respect and understanding. The elders nodded, satisfied that tradition had been honored in a way that also respected personal choice. Amina felt a wave of relief and warmth. The fear and uncertainty that had weighed on her since the accidental encounter began to fade. She realized that the lessons she had learned, the patience, the observation, the empathy, had brought her to this moment. And more than that, she recognized that her connection with Derek was genuine, built on trust, respect, and shared experience rather than mere circumstance. The ceremony began, and Amina and Derek followed the traditions of the village. They exchanged gestures of respect, offered small gifts to the elders, and performed the rituals with care and attention. Each act, though rooted in custom, felt meaningful to them personally. They were not simply following rules. They were participating in a shared understanding, a bond that had grown naturally over time. As the day continued, villagers celebrated with music, laughter, and food. Amina found herself smiling freely, feeling a sense of belonging she had never expected. She danced with children, helped elders with small tasks, and shared quiet moments of conversation with Derek. Their partnership, once defined by circumstance and law, had transformed into a genuine connection, a relationship built on trust, respect, and shared growth. Later in the evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the village settled into quiet reflection, Amina and Derek walked together to the stream. The water glistened in the fading light, reflecting the sky above and the quiet beauty of the moment. "I never expected this," Amina said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "I came here curious about life, but I found so much more. Lessons, understanding, and you." Derek smiled, his eyes gentle. "Life often surprises us, Amina. What began as obligation has grown into something meaningful, and it is because of your courage, your respect, and your willingness to learn that we have reached this moment together." She felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I am grateful," she said. "Grateful for the lessons, for the trust, and for the connection we have built. I feel like I have truly learned what it means to respect tradition while staying true to myself." Derek nodded, understanding her words without needing further explanation. The bond between them, forged through challenges and nurtured through trust, was now strong and genuine. It was not simply a result of circumstance. It was a partnership built on mutual understanding, care, and shared experience. In the days that followed, life in the village continued, but Amina felt a sense of peace she had never known. She no longer feared the expectations or the scrutiny of the villagers. Instead, she embraced the rhythms of the community, participating in rituals, helping with daily tasks, and sharing quiet moments of laughter and conversation with Derek. Each day was a lesson, a reminder that respect, empathy, and understanding were the foundations of meaningful connection. She also reflected on herself, realizing how much she had grown. The city girl who had arrived curious and uncertain had transformed into someone who could navigate challenges with confidence, patience, and awareness. She had learned to balance personal values with the expectations of a close-knit community, finding strength in both. Derek, too, had shown growth. While always guided by tradition, he had learned to see beyond the rules, to appreciate curiosity, and to value the perspective of someone from a different world. Their partnership, once bound by circumstance, had become a relationship of equals, built on mutual respect, shared understanding, and genuine care. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, painting the village in warm light, Amina and Derek stood together overlooking the fields. The villagers were beginning their daily routines, unaware of the quiet reflection taking place on the hill. "Ready," Amina said softly, taking a deep breath. "Ready to continue learning, to continue growing, and to face whatever comes next with courage. And I will be here, every step of the way. We have learned much, and there is still more to discover. But together, we can navigate anything." Amina smiled, feeling a sense of completion and hope. What had begun as fear, confusion, and obligation had transformed into understanding, trust, and genuine connection, She realized that life, tradition, and human relationships were not always simple, but when approached with respect, empathy, and openness, they could lead to growth, partnership, and fulfillment. The village continued around them, alive with music, laughter, and the quiet rhythm of daily life. But in that moment, Amina and Derek felt a sense of harmony, a balance between tradition and choice. They had faced challenges, navigated tension, and built trust, and now they stood together, ready to move forward with respect, understanding, and hope for the future. And so, what had begun as an accidental encounter and a binding obligation ended as a story of connection, growth, and mutual respect. Amina had learned the ways of the village, Derek had embraced a broader understanding, and together they had created a bond that honored tradition while allowing space for personal choice. The journey had been challenging, yet transformative, leaving both of them stronger, wiser, and more connected than they had ever imagined.